This is update for February 25, 2023, days 367 of the war and of the date update. So we passed 1 year of the war anniversary and started the year number 2 of the war. So first, we're going to start a little bit with strategic events, and then we're going to switch uh, to the front line. So first of all, there are news that from Polish company Orlen, which is integrated oil and gas company in Poland. I think it's state-owned. So they said that Russia stopped pumping oil through this Druzhba pipeline. This is the whole Druzhba pipeline system. The main part is going from Russia, and then it splits in Moser into northern branch and a southern branch. The whole throughput is 66.5 million metric tons per year. The northern is roughly 50 million, and the southern is 16.7. So it looks like the northern branch is sort of dead, and which is the main one. As you can see, it's 50 million out of 66. So pretty much all intents and purposes, this has been stopped. This signs here, icons here, it means oil refinery, and on this little ship icons means oil port where you can basically transfer oil to ships. So as you can see, all of this, including Germany, is being affected. In my understanding, there are two refineries. One is Schwedt, another one is Leuna. Not clear. They're probably going to get oil from somewhere else. Really not clear how that's going to be sorted out here. But all I'm just trying to say is Russia decided to stop it. They clearly, I'd say, doubling down and severing their ties with the West. Then the southern branch seems to be still actually amazingly working, because as you can see, it goes through Ukraine, and part of the reason is because Hungary is sort of lobbied and was able to receive exemption to actually get crude oil through this pipeline. So probably that's why it's still operating, even though it goes through through Ukraine. So this is what's going on, recent developments here. From Russian perspective, it's not end of the world. It wasn't much of the oil. I don't think it was sort of pumping all of this 50 million. At this point, probably was fraction of it. It's probably like 10% of it or something. Very relatively, I would say, small amount. So the most of it is probably going to go, as mentioned before, to India, Turkey, China, and in, as we all know, what India does, it processes and then brings it to the U.S. essentially. That's kind of how it works. On related note to the U.S. and Russia, U.S. is actually finally imposing sanctions or duties, 200% duties on Russian aluminium. If you remember, I mentioned before, there was initial decision not to do that, but months ago, now finally decision has been made to prevent Russian aluminium from going to the US. What this means is that global economy is being, deglobalized, so the economic ties being severed, and that really means more inflation in the West, because prices for the inputs in the production are going to go up. And if you paid attention, there was PC inflation number that came out on Friday in the US, and it was clearly showing that inflation is not dying or not slowing down. It's persistent, which again goes back to what I mentioned before, that interest rates are gonna go higher in order to stop inflation, to get it under control. If they not, inflation will get even higher, and then you need to do increase interest rates even more higher. So which probably will bring some kind of like economic depression in the West, and then the rest of the world will follow. So there's no, it's still one sort of big ball essentially, even though there are a lot of now blockages inside of this big ball, but it's still, there are still sort of connecting channels basically. And then just want to mention a little bit about this Chinese plan, which turned out to be much ado about nothing. Um, what Well, I would say it's not even a plan; it's just a sort of wish list. We are for all good and against everything that's bad. So essentially, it's not a plan. And what this really means is that China is not ready to make any decisive moves, and it's still kind of trying to buy time for itself. It doesn't feel like it's ready, which it makes sense if you remember I mentioned that Chinese what's that, Central Committee of Communist Party is gonna meet starting on 26, going through 28th, where there will be major decision made, major appointments in the Chinese top, and so nobody wants to sort of rock the boat before the whole power system is finalized and established in China. Related to this is actually uh, Belarus president, so it's actually Belarus here, which is essentially one with Russia, but from mm, from foreign affairs perspective, there are two countries. It gives extra vote for Russia, so that's why it's kept sort of nominally independent, but practically it's essential extension of Russia. But so the president of Belarus is going to visit China starting on 28th through the March 2nd. So as you can see, the visit is coincides with the end of this Central Committee meeting, which at that point, by the time he comes there, the all major decisions were going to be made, and so he knows who to talk to, what to discuss, and so that you can have meaningful conversation. So this is what's happening there. In terms of Chinese support to Russia, and specifically shell-wise, which is big problem for Russia right now. Um, Basically, it has not been decided, and probably will not be decided until after this Central Committee meeting that ends on February 28th. So we'll see what happens after that. U.S. is preemptively warning China, European Union warning China with sanctions if they try to do that, um, and we'll see what happens. I'm sure China will do practical analysis where they will calculate how much they will lose versus how much they will gain, and that's probably how it's going to work. And plus, uh, they probably still buying time to get more from the West, even though the river is drying up in terms of transfer of technology, investments, everything. It's clearly drying up, but they still would like to get as much as they can before they sort of be ready to move on their own. So that may also be weighing on the Chinese leadership decisions in terms of supporting Russia. Um, Now let's switch to Ukraine a little bit. Ukraine is receiving those Leopard 2 tanks. I think first four were delivered from Poland. Before that, there was delivery from Canada. As I said before, this is being, let's say, trumpeted by propaganda in Ukraine and in the West as some huge achievement. Um, while it's definitely big and positive for Ukraine in terms of having actually comparable and slightly better equipment than Russia has, it does not resolve the problem because the number of those tanks is small. That's one part. Um, Second part is the way they will be used in Ukraine. Ukraine will not be able to utilize their advantages, and without utilizing those advantages, it's slightly better tank than T90. Not hugely better, and uh, they probably will be lost in relatively short order. In probably it's 2-3 months. The problem is that there is not new sort of lineup of tanks that can be easily delivered, because even this, as you can see, is being delivered with a huge effort in terms of most of them are in disrepair, require a lot of repair. Um, Things basically are not ready, and there is no basically production line that's sort of dedicated and can produce for Ukraine, and that's a challenge. But in Russia, there is a production line and huge factory that's making tanks um, in, well, I would say not large numbers, but I would say relatively large numbers, so at least so far sufficient for the Russian army. And those are, I mean, T90, which is uh, definitely a better version of T72. It's not sort of breakthrough; it's just better version of it. Um, but at the same time, it's some improvement. Let's put this way for the Russian army. In terms of T14, which is called Armata, that is dead. Um, you probably will not see any armatas on the front line. Well, I think Russia has like 15 or 20 of them, max 30. There's no clear number. They may send some of those just to test them and so on, but this is going to be a similar situation with Leopard 2, or Challenger, where just too little to make any meaningful difference. And so they basically um, will be more like sort of military curiosity as any strategic um, tool. Um, in terms of now going back to the Russian situation, um, Russia is clearly facing strategic dead end with the shortages of ammunition. And ammunition, I mean shells, 152 millimeter shells to be specific, because it was the main tool to break Ukrainian defensive lines and make advances. And even those advances were extremely painful and extremely slow and costed a lot of resources for the Russian army. Now there's more and more emerging evidence that there is clearly shortages of 152 millimeter shells for the Russian army as a whole. They basically, the strategic decision has been made. Okay, we're gonna deprive even more Russian army and redirect whatever we can scramble to Wagner mercenaries to allow them to finally capture Bahmut. Once that happens, though, however, um, there is again, Russian side is back to basic. Okay, we don't have shells. What are we gonna do? Again, start attacking Vuhledar with similar results, or trying to capture Konstantinivka, which will take again 3, 4, 5, 6 months as the way it goes, and with the shortages of ammunition. So, in other words, Russia is in difficult strategic position in terms of it doesn't have the shells and it doesn't have um, producing manufacturing facilities to increase production to the required level. So that's the biggest problem, because most of those manufacturing facilities were destroyed over past 30 years. As I mentioned, there are, I think, only two plants left, and out of the two, only one produces 152 millimeter shells. So even it's being a little bit modernized and the capacity increase, but it's all marginal increases, and both sides need sort of revolutionary changes in terms of the production capacity, because there are also increases in the West. I think France opening up new facility that's going to produce 100,000 shells per year, which is totally insufficient. Then US is increasing capacity, again, totally insufficient increases. And I believe that's about it. Maybe there are a couple more countries doing it, but all of those are marginal increases that are not going to resolve the shell hunger problem. Not even close, let's put this way. It's going to be a severe and acute problem for the both sides. And this might be a reason why Russia is still sort of not attacking and may not be attacking. We'll see what happens. And similar situation on Ukrainian side is basically this shortage, and by shortage I mean acute shortage, not just like, oh, we don't have 10% of what we need or 20%. It's like, okay, we have only, let's say, 30, 40, maybe 20% of what we need, something like that. And I would say closer to 20% than to 40%. So so that all leads to basically the whole conflict is kind of like becoming, to extent, frozen. It's still sort of painful, it's still extremely bad and so on, but it freezes it by just by the virtue that there is simply not enough shells for the both sides to conduct active warfare. So that's a strategic sort of situation, and it's unclear how this is going to be resolved. For Ukrainian side, which is obviously clear, Ukraine is getting from the West, but in their near future and medium term, Ukraine will. This problem is not going to be resolved on Ukrainian side. For the Russian side, the same situation. Internally, Russia is not going to be able to resolve that problem. The only sort of big unknown card is China, because China can, if it throws its weight, it can resolve that problem for Russia. And that's why there is so much rhetoric going on from the US and from the European Union in attempt to stop China from sort of resolving this sort of balance in favor of Russia. So again, remains to be seen how it's going to all play out, but that's just where we are at the moment. Now let's a little bit. I'm just going to mention a little bit about the Ukrainian power grid. Is still alive, in a much better shape right now. Essentially, majority of the customers, and by that I mean residential customers, have electricity. Commercial, most of them don't, but the whole industry, the whole basically business part or economy is essentially dead in Ukraine anyways. There is not much sort of to talk about. The only I just want to, for those who knew, I just want to mention the reason Ukraine is still alive and afloat is because it's receiving financial help from the West, which essentially replaced significant portion of the economy. But the problem with that, and is that it's being channeled exclusively to Ukrainian government, and then it doesn't go anywhere outside of basically Ukrainian government, and people who work for the government. So basically, private part of the economy is completely deprived of any resources and essentially quickly dying off. And we'll see how it all plays out, but it may create some social problems in, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6 months um, uh, inside of the country. Now let's actually switch to the walk through the front line. We're going to do it in a clockwise fashion, as always, starting from the very north, and situation along the state border or more or less the same, no essential differences. Uh, some Ukrainian attacks on the towards the Russian side, but they are more sort of propaganda show rather than anything that's truly meaningful or useful. Let's put it this way. Now let's jump to the North Lugansk front line. Things here are very similar to what they were before. Essentially, Russian army is focused on attacking in this southern sector, uh, attempting to basically capture this whole forest here between these two rivers. Well, actually, three rivers, and then also attempting to mm, say destroy Ukrainian bridgeheads on the western side of this river and basically push Ukrainian troops behind the river. So far, there's no major successes. Maybe there's some limited successes of capturing, 200-300 meters of the territory, but from all intents and purposes, this is essentially nothing there. Now let's move to North Donbass front line, where things are pretty bad, as you can imagine, for Ukrainian side. Uh, Nothing sort of, there's no positive developments here, and there won't be for some time. So basically, Wagner mercenaries have captured village Yagidne, which is to the south east of Berhivka here, where I'm showing, improving their position even sort of more. Then they also started moving towards Rykhovo-Vasilievka here, made some progress there. So let me actually show. This is sort of more detailed map. So as you can see, this is this Yagidne. The capture of Yagidne forced withdrawal from this northern tip of Bahmut of Ukrainian troops. So this was kind of like a domino effect that forced withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from here. So essentially, the front line is getting sort of deeper and deeper into Bahmut. And as you can see, it's just a question of time before Ukrainian troops will lose Bahmut. There's no, it just gets sort of, how to say, the rope getting tighter and tighter around the neck with every passing day. And it seems that Ukrainian defenses are, I won't say collapsing, but very soft, especially if you compare to the past. The front line simply doesn't hold. Even the pushes, I cannot say the pushes are like not that strong. They're not weak either, but it's not that, the push is super strong, but the front line basically doesn't hold. And as you can see, Wagner mercenaries also spreading here to this along this road, which essentially what this also means that with the fall of Bakhmut, this whole area on the eastern side of this freshwater channel probably will be captured by the Russian troops as well. So it's not going to be just fall of Bakhmut. This whole area. This means the fall of this whole area and essentially withdrawal of Ukrainian troops to the western side of this channel. Going back actually to this softness is I'm becoming more and more convinced this is related to the quality of the replacements, quality of the front, soldiers who are on the front line, who are less motivated, less willing to risk their life, less committed at this point, and so that's why you see this softness of the defenses here. The response actually of Ukrainian political top is to tighten screws even further. So if you remember, I mentioned about the law that has been passed that if you retreat, you basically go to jail. Well, at least it's not you're not going to get shot like during Stalin times, but essentially it's not huge difference. So what the Ukrainian political top decided to do is that the number of years you're getting in jail is not good enough. It's not preventing, it's not doing what they want to do. So they decided to increase it by a couple more years. So there are basically new amendments to the laws that were just passed to increase number of years, for which you go to jail if you retreat. So again, this is not gonna resolve anything. This is road to nowhere, as I mentioned before. But as I said, so far Ukrainian political and military leadership taking Ukraine on the road to nowhere, unfortunately. Uh, the reason, for example, why this line around Ivanivsky is holding better is because there is a third brigade, which much more motivated, better quality of sort of human material there. But again, it's being expanded basically to stop Russian troops here. Once that material is expanded, we will see the same results as we've seen here with the regular brigades and with the regular replacements. And that's why it's criminal what's being done by Ukrainian military and political top when they use the most precious resource, which is people, to plug the holes on the front line and to cover ineptness of the top of the military top and political top as well. So that's a result, and I think the situation will get worse, especially if Russia will manage to resolve its shell hunger problem. If Russia basically does not resolve its shell hunger problem, the situation might be contained because Russia will not be able to effectively have like meaningful offensives. So remains to be seen, but this is potentially long term in very deep danger for Ukrainian side. This sort of what's a pink here is this main feeder road that feeds Ukrainian troops in Bahmut. So as you can see, Russian troops are getting essentially extremely close to it, and then they may establish basically direct fire control over it in a matter of a day or two, and then the fall of Bahmut will be sort of exponential. So it's not going to be just a straight line where we think, like, okay, it's going to be another 10-15 days. If things are going the way they're going, the whole collapse may accelerate in exponential fashion. This is how it looked like on 23rd. So you can see that again back to 25th, meaningful sort of worsening of the situation, and this is how it used to be on the 13th. So as you can see again, the situation worsens faster and faster. Again, exponential changes here. This is just the same look, so a bigger picture as you can see, but the same idea. Okay, now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here are without essential changes. Regular Russian army is attacking everywhere, without much to show for that. Again, this goes back to what I said before, that regular Russian army um, is not able to do much against regular Ukrainian army, because those are two Soviet armies, and the advantage of Ukrainian army is that soldiers on average are more motivated. For this reason, they're defending their own land, and majority of Russian soldiers uh, don't understand what they're doing in this war. Um, so for that reason, there is very like sort of low motivation in the regular Russian army as well, on individual soldier level. Uh, Now let's finish with the Zaporizhya front lines. Things here are quiet, no major changes, and um, we'll see. This could be very dangerous area for the offensive, but as I said before, there is very clear evidence that the Russian army is um, on a diet, on a shell diet, that's probably getting worse by day, and eventually it's going to be more and more of a hunger and starvation. So, for that reason, this offensive may never materialize. Thanks for watching, and till next time. Bye bye.